Lastly, another approach for white in the Karlsbad structure is to play some sort of kingside attack. There's a Pillsbury attack which you use with f4, but actually, if you just want to put the boot in on the king side, you can choose whichever formation you like. I think White's just going to say, well, my pieces are well placed, I've got a bit more space, and I'll attack when and where I want to. Spielman's original 1920 era approach to the exchange queen's gambit was to play it with knight ge2 and rook e8. So this is a type of position, I think probably this exact position we've seen in a couple of games already. But now in this position, White what White takes is courage in both hands and castles long. And now this position is utterly transformed. White's castled into a queen side, which is always lively, that's already got some of the pawn protection missing. But actually, just right now, I don't see black being so fast on the queen side. Their pieces are, their pieces and pawns are not really pointing at White's king, and White is saying, right, well, I'm gonna have a go on the other side. Black plays in this position knight e4, takes, and h4, inviting black to win the g pawn and open up the h file. Black, who is in this position, George Thomas, the British chess and badminton champion, plays f5 and doesn't particularly want that. We'll block up those squares and files if we can. And queen to b3 check, that's the disadvantage of that move. So weak willy white squares. h5, coming ready or not. Trying to gum up the centre a little bit and swap off some pieces. And now classic Spearman sacrifice. Check. And takes. Now what happens if we take with the pawn? It's just mate. Okay. So knight takes, pawn takes, and bishop to e6 takes on h7 check, king h8, and now d5, busting up the position a little bit more. And after a check, queen to g5, moves the other rook across, takes on g6, rook to h8 check, and black decided that they'd had enough because, amongst other things, the queen is coming to b7, and the black king is going to find it difficult to find a piece willing to blockade the check, to block the check. So, characteristically cheerful and aggressive kingside attack there from Spielman. Surely you can't get away with that in the modern era. Well, let's have a little look. This is one Tony Miles playing, actually not the strongest opponent, but most opponents have got teeth if you let them bite you. So in this position, similar sort of Karpovian exchange queen's gambit. The position with knight to f3 rather than knight g2, and this Karpov move h6, just saying, well, yeah, I'm improving my position, how about you? And then after knight to f8, castles long. And after bishop to e6, g4, and off we jolly well go. And there was an exciting game. I think probably black had decent chances in some of this game, but Tony Miles, a very strong grandmaster, was backing himself to find the better moves on average than his opponent, and so it proved to be. Lastly, let's as an attacking setup, you don't just have to play that way. I've talked about this Pillsbury attack. Here is one of Pillsbury's attacks in the Queen's Gambit. His opponent has got this duff bishop on c8, and so where are we going to park this? Well, his opponent in this game, this is the famous Pillsbury Tarash encounter from Hastings 1895. B6, perfectly reasonable way to try and develop the bishop. And Pillsbury sets up his attacking setup with, as we go through, rook e1 might not be the best move here, but c4. C4 is often frowned upon in these types of positions. Quotes, releasing the tension in the centre. But well, black's got to do something rather than just sit there and be attacked. So the Pillsbury attack, as it's came to be known, knight e5 and f4. Pillsbury was some sort of genius, and the thing that we have known for a long while, and Pillsbury showed very often himself in his games, backward pawn on a half-open file, big weakness. But in this position, he's saying, well, White's dynamic chances are a lot more important. How is Black going to get at that pawn? Is this knight really going to come to g4 and bother it? I don't think so. Are you going to come down the e file at it? Well, in order to do that, you need to move this knight, which means you move this knight. You need to move this knight. You need to move this pawn. And while you're doing all that, I might be able to arrange an accident for you. And this sort of dynamic approach to pawn weaknesses was supposed to be, the great invention of the Soviet school of the 1950s, whereas this is Pillsbury in the previous century. Dynamic chances trumping the weaknesses. One other thing about this, you'll see this pawn formation in the Stonewall attack by White. I always think the Stonewall attack is sort of one up from trying to play Scholar's Mate. You just put your pieces on the same squares and hope that Black doesn't notice that they're facing checkmate. The big disadvantage of the Stonewall formation, of course, is this horrible bishop on c1, which is completely blocked in by the pawns. Well, in this position, that horrible bishop on c1 is this beacon of power and delight that is sitting on g5. So this is sort of an improved version of a Stonewall. Anyhow, off we go. Pieces trotting over towards the king side. I think you can start to see actually that this rook e1 move might have been a bit of a waste of time, but we'll catch up. Swap. So queen g3, f6, chasing away that knight. But we've had a lot happen since, and White's e pawn is now not being shielded by the knight, or just not only by the knight, but also by a black pawn. So that's not too bad. And with Black, I guess, having control of the five files from A to E, Pillsbury arranged and carried through an attack on the three files F to H, and got away with it. That's there to show them. Of course, you can't play that last in the modern era, can you? Well, there was a terrific game between Lajos Portish and Tigran Petrosyan many years ago. Petrosyan trying the Swiss defence here with Black, and White not trying the Karlsbad variation, but the some sort of advanced variation. But after a swap or two, this may be a formation that you remember half of from Tarash against Pillsbury, and there's the other half. So Portish in the modern era trying a Pillsbury style attack against Petrosyan, not with a half-open e-file, but showing that you can play this sort of way in the modern era, and won a absolutely smashing game there. But in the Queen's Gambit declined version, with the exchange variation version, so here's an exchange variation, a position which I've shown you a couple of times, moves like takes on f6 and h3 we've seen a few times. Here's Artur Yusupov, Rook A E1, which suggests they might be going for F3 and E4, but in fact going for E4, not E5 rather, and F4 with a Pillsbury style attack. Immediate threat is F5, winning a bishop, and so F6, chasing away the knight, and White's betting that the weaknesses that Black has on the king's side are more and more important than this pawn on E3. So that was a game by Yusupov against Fitzgerald Kruder. And here is the same. Sorry, so I've never heard of Herr Kruder, but here is played against Boris Spassky, who I have heard of, and again just adopts very much the same sort of approach with Rook A1, and the game continued with Knight E5 and F4, same sort of thing, F6 and Knight F3, and again we've got opportunities here to play for some sort of kingside attack. We do have this weak pawn on E3, but we can get rid of that and swap it for perhaps a less weak pawn on D4, and White won with a very nice attack. So you can play this way in the modern era. I've said right at the start of this video that nearly every book I've ever picked up, a repertoire book for White in the Queen's Gambit, saying, how should White handle these positions? It's nearly always the exchange variation with Knight G2, F3 and E4. But there are a couple of honourable exceptions. One of them is a repertoire book by one of my favourite chess authors, John Watson, a man who always brings such thoroughness and new ideas to an openings book. I mean, you can do one or the other, but to do both is just gold. Produced a repertoire book for White, I think called it a strategic opening repertoire for White, and he thought, well, why not play this variation with H3, this type of Queen's Gambit, and after a move like Bishop E6, then go for this Knight E5 plan, and takes F4, very much in the Yusupov style, a bit in a position where we've already played H3. And if you ever get to the point where you don't really fancy playing Pillsbury attacks every game, well, you've got some other plans. You know that H3 is a firm foundation for switching to a minority attack on the other side of the board. And if you prefer to approach this position with the central attack that we've seen from Botvinnik, then in this position, rather than playing Knight F3, you'll develop the bishop first, then play the knight to E2, and you've got time for F3 and E4. Anyhow, I think that's probably exhausted my and your patience about the Karlsbad structure. Very important structure in chess, and actually one that you'll meet in lots of different openings. So that the Caro-Kann exchange variation is essentially a Karlsbad. Dynamically very different because different sides started first, and it's White that has the half-open e-file and not Black, but it's a Karlsbad structure. And the other place I kept seeing it turn up in is in the London system. The two knight system for Black with knight F6, C5, and knight C6 is kind of a reversed Queen's Gambit, and the positions seem to me to very often drift towards Black deciding to swap on D4 and play a minority attack. There's some analysis that I've seen, but it's not public, from Chess Publishing by Eric Prier, the French grandmaster, looking at these D4 special systems and saying, well, this, quite often these positions seem to end up in something where Black had a potential minority attack, and Eric favoured Black. So structures are one of the keys to chess. The more structures you know, the more openings you'll be able to play better. Anyhow, I hope you're getting all right with it, and that's all from me for now. Sorry about the cold.